Hello there, thanks for joining me, Jessy Chahal. On Friday's edition of the Midday Update is the weekly roundup. We're coming to you, of course, live from our own little spaces right here in the city centre of Kuala Lumpur. I'd like to bring in now NORDIN ABDULLAH, my co-host, co-partner on this edition. Of course, as usual, NORDIN, great to see you and thanks for being with us once again. How has your week been?
It's been good. It's been a busy week, plenty of news to monitor, and because we're about to go into phase 2 in Klang Valley, I decided to be a little bit more casual today and wear a batik shirt, and also to remind everyone, go out and buy a batik shirt and support some local businesses.
Oh, you hit the nail on the head there. Speaking about going out and buying, what happened this week was the 9/9 online sale. Our reports have not been released yet, but I'm sure it's going to be absolutely ballistic because people don't have to go out now and they're shopping online. It's mad, crazy sales online. So, I know this has been a big, big attraction for the online shopping community. So, yes, perhaps a good week for many people who've been able to, go online and get their share of the loot. But nonetheless, on the program today, we speak about the National Recovery Plan, NORDIN, as well as how what can be done by the government to further empower the disabled or PWDs, people with disabilities. Also, one of the biggest news that made, headlines across the globe was the story of the pedophile, the Sarawakian pedophile being captured.
Exactly, and I think this is an interesting story of how the Australian enforcement agencies, together with the Malaysian enforcement agencies, were able to apprehend this, and it's again a great sign of being able to see the teamwork of different agencies across the world. We see the nature of crime changing. We see the nature of crisis changing, and that is often the case where there's a crime taking place in one jurisdiction, but the financial crime is taking place in a third jurisdiction. So wonderful work by the Malaysian police, wonderful work by their partners in Australia as well.
That's right. We'll more on that as we get to that topic later. But you did mention phase 2. And this is perhaps not a term that we're used to using, but it's about time to get used to it as we, of course, grow closer to achieving herd immunity across the nation. The Prime Minister earlier this week announced cross-district travel between Kuala Lumpur, Selangor and Putrajaya will now be allowed. And of course, he also added that roadblocks will be lifted. So, there's a lot more movement now on that in terms of as we move into phase 2, NORDIN. What are your thoughts around that, especially to still realize and understand that we are in the midst of a crisis?
We're still in the middle of a crisis. We're still in the midst of COVID-19. The numbers are still very high. But what we're seeing is a change in the understanding of how we deal with the numbers, and we're looking at a different set of numbers together with the raw data of the number of cases every day. And one of those key numbers is the ability to handle the crisis. And that is really at the cutting edge of that frontliners, the nurses, the doctors, and the medical facilities that Malaysia has, especially at the ICU level. So the fact that we're now being able to deal with that at that level, and the data is there to support it. And that's one thing we just saw Kyrie announce with this new website, where granular data is going to be available, and you're going to be able to actually dig into that data and actually start to not only dig into it and make your own opinions, but dig into it and add to the solutions. And I think this is the kind of concept of transparent, open government. And it's wonderful that Kyrie has kind of taken a historical approach to this in Malaysia, and like looking at a future-facing.
Being a transparent and open government. While we try to sort of crawl back into normalcy and try to bounce back with the economy, the government in itself as a unit, I guess, has many issues that need to be addressed. In fact, one of our feature discussions happening in just a couple of minutes is on the Malaysia My Second Home and expats who are living here in Malaysia, some of the impact of COVID-19 on this community. We'll be speaking to Mr. Andrew Davidson, CEO of the Expat Group Media, in just a couple of minutes. Please do stick around for that, for wherever you're watching us from, whether at home or live or on YouTube or on your mobile phone. If you're also watching this over the weekend, just keep in mind that this is a repeat, Nordin. We do go, sort of blast into the past here and there. But interestingly enough, that is the new norm and how we broadcast these days. I wanted to talk a little bit about what else the Prime Minister said this week. The Prime Minister echoed the concept of LNOB, and that is leave no one behind. This concept actually is a central transformative promise of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Sustainable Development Goals, which is, of course, something driven by the UN, otherwise known as the SDGs. So it's important, and it's also perhaps interesting to note that the Prime Minister is concerned about this issue, Nordin.
Again, and I think this is one area that we've seen. Also, again, a data point came out this week, which was the poverty rate, and we've seen the poverty rate increase up to 8.4%, which is a large jump, and it's primarily because of what happened with the COVID-19 economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the fact that the Prime Minister is talking about it, the fact that different ministers have talked about it this week, and they've started to realize that you can't leave anybody behind. So when we see that, there's two areas that we have to look at. We have to look at the urban poor, and we need to look at the rural poor. And I think this is two different sides of the same coin. But the fact that we're actually addressing it in a way that is going to be inclusive, data-driven, and across all communities, whether it's Malay, Chinese, Indian, Sabah, and Sarawakian, it's going to be an incredibly inclusive approach, from what I understand. And that is going to actually get us out of this dip or spike in poverty numbers. So I think while the numbers are there, I think the solution is also there. And a big part of that solution is the Klang Valley opening up, because economic activity will happen. When economic activity happens, jobs happen, people get paid, people are out of poverty. And I think we will see a very quick return within in a couple of months to that parity where we were at a few months ago or a year or so ago.
That's right. I mean, in line with what you're saying as well, this is the government's strategy and plan to ensure that no one is left behind, while at the same time as we as a nation make plans and commitment to exit this health crisis. So within this also, the government has spoken about increasing opportunities to provide room for job seekers, for them to fend for themselves and continue to be productive. But this is also interesting, the concept of the Malaysian family, which really sums up the spirit of the nation. As together we continue to focus on national development agenda, and what they say is ensuring that Malaysians are well taken care of. How can this be communicated better at a time like this, Noreen, from your crisis management expertise, to people who are still sort of fumbling through and trying to gain back their lives and livelihoods?
Exactly. Well, I think one of the things that the government needs to continue to do is to do for all the programs that they have. And this is the problem with the Malaysian government. They have so many programs. They've got so many good things going on. But a lot of people don't know how to get that access to those programs or access to that aid. And it's a communication problem. It's purely a communication problem. So we need for increased communication, and we need a community response. So part of that could be for NGOs and different companies running their CSR programs to help people get into these programs, to help people during this time, and help the government as well to roll out these communication programs as your CSR agenda. So it's right. Again, I like to use this a community approach to crisis management, and that's really, and that next granular level down is the family approach. So that's why it's very important that we continue to work hard as a team.
That's right. Just a heads up, we'll be speaking to Mr. Andrew Davidson, CEO of the Expat Group, on the Malaysia My Second Home program and the impact of COVID-19, or rather what it has been on the expat community here living in Malaysia. Nordin, just wanted to circle back to what you're saying about extending a helping hand and helping people to get back on their feet. The MPN chairman now, Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin, told Bernama earlier this week that all matters pertaining to the nation's recovery will take the whole of society and whole of government approach. This is a plan by the government to help the country out of the economic downturn.
Exactly, and there's no room for politics here. There's no room for failure either. And if we only try to take care of our own people, it's not going to work. You've got to take care of everybody, and this is one of the things that we've got to put aside any kind of difference at the moment and move to this greater solution. And I think one of the things we've also got coming up is the session in Parliament is also coming up. So I think it's going to be a wonderful opportunity for lively debate and for these issues to be brought to the House of the People.
That's right. And, talking about the people, I just wanted to highlight this big news that was welcomed by many segments, was also trending on Twitter. The Election Commission this week announced that they will proceed with implementing the lowering of voting age from 21 to 18. So they will be implementing Undi 18 by the end of this year. That target is 31st of December. This is a ruling by the High Court. It will not have to wait for the government to decide, basically. And if at any point of one point of time there would be an appeal against this decision, it will only be because there are several laws that still need to be passed by Parliament. So this has been a long time coming, Nordin.
It's about getting Malaysia to the global benchmark of where we are in the world. Most democracies around the world, the voting age is as low as 18. In some cases, it's even lower. So one, I think we're getting to that point. I think we're quickly getting to that point where all the other laws that need to be sorted out can be done. So, and I don't think there's any room for excuses here either. Not getting it done will be a crisis. And I don't think this current government or any other government for that matter wants that crisis. I think we're talking about 7 million new voters and 7 million unhappy people is never a good thing.
Well, I'd like to bring in now Mr. Andrew Davidson, the CEO of the Expat Group Media. Andy, thanks for being with us. It's good to speak to you. Let's talk a little bit about Malaysia My Second Home and expats living in Malaysia. TEG recently conducted one of the largest surveys of expatriates living in the country. What were some of these key findings, Andy? Okay,
first of all, let's just clarify that I think Malaysia My Second Home program is misunderstood by a lot of people. Not only the actual program itself, but also who actually participates. Now, we've been closely involved with it for the last 18 years, and we've done fairly regular surveys of this category of our readers so that we can get feedback continuously about what they feel about the program and things that can be done to improve it. So the survey we did after the announcement that new rules were going to be applied, we had our biggest response ever. We had 900 participants responding, and we had 500 prospects, people who were looking to join the program, who responded. Their results were very, very similar. Less than a quarter of either category actually received 40,000 plus a month. And in addition to that, they were not able to place the fixed deposit. A few of them could place a fixed deposit, but most of them were not willing to place so much money on a low interest deposit. So the net result was that only 2% of each category were either capable of meeting the new results or were willing to meet the new requirements. So it's a bit disappointing, and it does show that there'll be a mass exodus of people if they are imposed on the existing visa holders.
So at this
now,
point,
Andrew, okay, go ahead. Thanks, Jessy. One of the things I wanted to ask, this group is a considerable investor group in the country. What are your findings in the report? How much are they investing? What is that story?
Well, our best estimate, based on the information we've gathered from our surveys, is that if you take about 1,000 of the group that we reach, which is mostly the retirees, I might add, for every 1,000 people who are approved over a 10-year period, which we're taking as the average time that they stay here, although some stay longer, obviously, there's about 2 billion ringgit contributed to Malaysia. So that's the financial contribution, but there's a huge non-financial contribution which is often not recognized. It helps foreign direct investment. It helps support the medical industry and medical tourism. To some extent, it helps the property industry because about 70% of them buy homes. It shows that Malaysia is a welcoming country. It moves it up the livability scale, and it's basically a big help, in my opinion, to the international image of Malaysia.
So, Andy, there have been announcements with regards to the Malaysia My Second Home program. How has this been received by the expat community who are, or rather, have invested under this program? And for those potentials, as you say as well, what does it look like to them?
Well, to be honest, I would say that to state that they're upset would be an understatement. This group is very, very distressed, because you have to understand that since the program started, the Ministry of Tourism has been saying that A, the visa is renewable, and B, they will not apply any new terms on existing participants. So the fact that that promise is being broken has had a huge impact on people. In fact, a survey we did 2 years ago showed that 72% of the people who retired here wanted to spend the rest of their lives here. So they looked upon this as a long-term program. Now, 98% find they can't meet the new conditions, so they'd have to leave if they're imposed on them. Obviously, that's very distressing. So I do hope and urge the government to please respect the promises made by previous administrations that new rules will not be applied to existing participants.
And I noticed you've got a very strong data-driven solution, and you've done a lot of research here, Andy. But what are some of the solutions moving forward? What are some of the ideas that have come out of this survey, and what are some of the solutions that we can put on the table that the government could consider?
Well, as I say, that there are different groups of people who apply for the program, right? There's some people who come here to get their children educated. There's some people who get the visa so they don't have to apply for a visa each time they come here. There are others who just have it as what I would call a backdoor visa because of problems in their own country, so they have somewhere to flee if they need to. So the core group, though, and the ones that probably contribute the most are the retirees who plan to spend the rest of their life here and bring millions of ringgit into the country. I would strongly advocate creating a visa for that group, a retirement visa, which is specifically targeted them, and then looking at the other segments and making decisions on whether you want to create visas for that segment. For example, the parents of people who come here to have their children educated. There's quite a few of those from South Korea and from Japan. So if you look at each segment and make decisions based on that, then I believe that the program can contribute to the National Recovery Plan. Whereas I fear that the new regulations will actually have the opposite effect and be adverse in terms of the country's economy.
Andy, as an advocate and perhaps representing the expat community in Malaysia, what are some of your parting thoughts?
Parting thoughts are, I feel bad because I've been reiterating the promise that the rules will not apply to people in the program already. So I would like to see that honored so I don't become an unintentional liar. In terms of going forward, I think the program can make its contribution to the economy. It's not major in terms of the total economy, but it is a very positive contribution, financial and non-financial. And I'd like to see it continue to contribute, and I'd like to be a part of it. I love this country, and it's a great place to live. The visa holders are very happy here, and they're paying for themselves. They're not taking anything out of the economy, so let them stay and encourage them to come. That would be my message.
It was a pleasure having you, Andrew. Thank you very much for weighing in and sharing your thoughts as well. Here's hoping for the best. That was Andrew Davidson, CEO of the Expat Group Media, weighing in a little bit on expats living here in Malaysia and some of the impact of COVID-19. Perhaps, NORDIN, you'd like to share some thoughts as well, being from that community.
Exactly. Well, I've been here for almost 30 years, and being part of that expatriate community has been one of the joys in my life. I always say that I can live anywhere in the world, and I choose to live here in Malaysia. The people are welcoming, the place is an amazing place, the food is great, and it's something that, expatriates, and not just expatriates from Australia, New Zealand, the UK, but, as Andrew mentioned earlier, there's expats from Japan, Korea, and they do contribute quite a lot. And one of the things I always remember as an expatriate kid in the international school, we would always do CSR programs and community programs. So that kind of reality is something that a lot of those expatriates bring with them. And they're more than happy to contribute as volunteers, as people who are happily being part of the community now. And at the same time, it's not a very big group of people. So I think part of the problem is there's a difference between expatriates as well as the large number of foreign workers in the country, and that includes a lot of illegal foreign workers, unfortunately, who have come across the border. But one thing that the Malaysian government has done, especially, you look at MMEA and the Customs Department, as well as the police and the armed forces, they've actually helped control the borders a lot better during COVID-19. So I think we've got a different starting point now where we're able to improve the scenario. And this will be actually something that we can look forward to in terms of designing a positive future, making Malaysia a world-class destination for investors. And having these people here is part of that equation, because we saw the foreign investor growth in London, for example. Many of the Arabs would travel to London and say, oh, this is a lovely place, and they'll end up buying a house there. After that, they end up investing in business there, and then you've got a vibrant Arab community in London who is a key part of the investment equation there. So how do we replicate that? How do we do that? I think this is an obvious space for continued discussion.
That's right. I think it was important to bring that up as well, to get perhaps a different perspective from what we may assume or what we may just generally think we know. It's always, it's what you know, what you know you don't know, and what you don't know you don't know, which is always the case in three different aspects and looking at a topic or issue. Well, talking about impact of, the pandemic over different segments of society, I also wanted to address earlier when we did talk about one of the biggest headlines this week was of course the Sarawakian pedophile. He's been on a 14-year run, and he's now recently been captured. He has been sharing child abuse material on the internet. This goes back to year 2007, and he's been linked to more than 1,000 images and videos depicting sexual abuse from minors. As disturbing as it is, and I think we have this platform, safe space for us to highlight some of these topics to the entire nation. What I wanted to really stress upon as well is that the Women's Ministry this week came out to say that they will be continuing to educate children against falling prey to pedophiles. And what's interesting, or what's dangerous here, is that pedophiles take time to groom their victims. They tempt them, they allure them, they allow them to be, on their mobile devices via sort of, enticing them to play games and so on and so forth. And so with this pandemic, with parents working from home, not having perhaps enough time, and children also not really being in a physical classroom, there's a lot of space for all this to happen.
Unfortunately, that's correct, Jessy. And one of the things that we need to be very mindful of is these pedophiles are serial pedophiles. They're like serial killers. They do it once, they do it again, and it's a continued behavior. And now we've seen that this pedophilia has turned also into a cyber crime, and it's because it was a cyber crime that police were able to catch him. But the fact that you mentioned earlier, this grooming approach and this ability to groom young boys, young girls, is very important that the Ministry of Women and Family do take a very strong stand on this, do put the resources in, because with the increased number of people dropping below that poverty line, these are actually the targets of a lot of these serial pedophiles, and we need to be very mindful of this.
That's right. So we want to say, job well done to the Ministry of Women for ensuring that this remains top priority amongst the many other things as well. Another thing that we talked about this week earlier on the show as well was that the government must present evaluations done on the persons with disabilities, an action plan 2023-2030. Bernama's very own chairperson, Ras Adiba, has urged Putrajaya to consider proposals to empower the disabled. Another important issue, and I'm glad that we are able to address it this week as well, NORDIN.
I think very lucky. I think on the back of what our national heroes did at the Paralympics, I think everyone has like really seen that, hey, these are people who can deliver something for society, and they're not a group of people that should be shunned, not a group of people that should be avoided. And of course, Senator Razaleeba Razi is really on the forefront of this agenda. And the fact that she's pushed and continues to push long before it was fashionable to do so. She was doing the hard yards, as we say. And if we get it right, and we talk about this idea, and the Prime Minister talked about this idea of no one being left behind, and we look at the global numbers, 15% of any population has a disability of some sort. You can't leave 15% of your population behind and expect to be a global economic powerhouse. You can't leave 15% of your population behind and expect to do well in the sporting arena. So again, it's about getting the equation right. And it's really what the Prime Minister has said, no one gets left behind. And we've got a champion like Datuk Razaleeba Razi, who has put herself out there and is doing it day in and day out with her team. And it's wonderful to see what the groups like OKU Central have done in the last few months.
That's right. As we round up this edition of the Midday Update, here's what's trending on Twitter. Everyone's headed to Langkawi, it seems. It's been trending as all fully vaccinated individuals will be allowed to travel beginning September 16, Malaysia Day. So, it's perhaps holiday time for many people who can. There's also a lot of information going on Twitter about, some discounts and how cheap the flight tickets are and so on and so forth. NORDIN, I hope you're not joining the crew down in Langkawi too, or are you?
I'm not able to. I'm just wearing the shirt. I'm just wearing the shirt today. Unfortunately, my wife hasn't got her second vaccine yet, but she'll get it next week, and then we'll be in October. But I think Malaysians are wonderful tourists. They know how to travel. AirAsia as a company has been at the center of putting Malaysia on the map in ASEAN. We will get. People will get out to the islands. People will get out to those locations that they miss and love.
Malaysians are going back to some semblance of normalcy, but let's all do it safely. Everyone do double mask if you're going out. Try to stay home if you can, and do remember to social distance. NORDIN, it's been a pleasure. We're going to wrap up this edition of the weekly, the Midday Update, the weekly roundup. Jessy and NORDIN signing off. Have a great weekend ahead. Bye-bye.